was this guru, did you do obeisance in front of him? Did you treat him differently?
Oh no, it was definitely more treating him like a god. So I'll just tell you right away. And within the first retreat, he revealed that he was God. He was an incarnation of Vishnu, who is God in Hinduism.
That's like the main deity. Yeah.
Yeah. And his wife was his main consort. And then this other younger woman who lived with him and his wife was his other consort. And that they were all, it was one guru in 3 bodies, one divinity in 3 bodies. And that followed the archetype of all the highest incarnations of Vishnu always had 2 female consorts. And so it was also said that this was true of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and Mary Magdalene.
Lord of mercy.
And Joshua, you said this came out right away in that first retreat. And so to your mind then, you were obviously in a place where you were open to that. Or were you?
I was resistant. I was resistant at first. And this guy was able to, so I'm there, and me and many other people were thinking, what's this guy doing with 2 women? And so he proceeded to break down the whole room, explain to us how we're projecting, how when a nun looks at a prostitute, all she sees is holiness. But when a prostitute looks at a nun, all she sees is her own vileness and projects it onto the nun. And he says this, and it worked. And I started sobbing like a baby, And I felt like I'm having this breakthrough with my ego. I realized that I had set myself up as the judge of my own goodness, and how now I'm going to serve others. And I forfeit my claim that I can judge my own goodness. So I had some kind of repentance surrounding that situation. I'll be honest with you. The whole time I was in the school, I was running 2 stories in my mind, because this is how much of a basket case I am. I'm like the most conflicted person you'll ever meet. I was running one story that he was who he said he was, and then another story where he was a charlatan. I was running both stories. I was writing both stories the whole time. So truth be told, the whole time I was very conflicted, and this made me miserable, because I would come home and I'd be fighting, trying to reach enlightenment, trying to meditate, not really having the results I would have hoped for how hard I was trying. Having doubts because you had to pay for certain things, But the thing is like, I really believe that everybody in the school at that point was totally sincere, like just 100% sincere. And I think that the love between us, even though it might have been based on some false pretenses, was real insofar as like we knew love to be real. So I don't fault like any of the people in this group, and I still pray for them. So so I just kind of went on that cycle where every year I would have my doubts that would come right up to the critical moment, and then boom, I would break through. And then even sometimes getting to the retreat, I'd be like, I don't know, is this real? And then I would kind of suffer. And then by the end of the retreat, boom, I would have my breakthrough. At a certain point, it also just seemed very complicated that we needed to practice like all these, like to practice Hinduism, Buddhism, and Christianity just felt very complicated to me at a certain point.
It was doing stuff. It was working for you for a while, it sounds like. But then did it just kind of
felt like I was having sanctification.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it was like pride, it was like about me gaining self-control to be like, look how much self-control I have. Stopping certain sins. Like I became celibate because I'm like, okay, if Jesus is real, then the Christian spiritual or sexual ethic is true.
Joshua, you had said before that this school, ironically, in some ways, I'll say it, but you can correct me, brought you to Christ or opened you up to Christ. Can you talk about that part?
I have no doubt in my mind that had Christ been presented to me in any other package at that time, I would have completely rejected it. because even in that package that was like so tailor-made for me, like honestly, the only thing that wasn't tailor-made for that, to me, for that package was that it included Christ, you see? Like I wanted everything except for Christ. So looking back, I truly believe that God met me where I was, but he wasn't going to leave me there. Yeah, I mean, I still barely accepted him, you know? It still came down to that really me having to actually face my own hypocrisy, and it was also me finally being willing to give up my moral autonomy. At some point, I finally realized that if I really want to know the truth, I have to be willing to sacrifice my moral autonomy, which basically meant becoming celibate. Like that was the main thing that I didn't want to accept. And then I accepted it. Nobody imposed it on me. Once I believed that Christ is who he said he was, even though I believed extracurricular things, we'll call it, you know, I still came to believe that Christ was the Son of God. He was God. He was basically who he said he was. And that for me just flipped a switch. Like then I have to stop fornicating.
So at the same time, though, you were still believing in the Hindu deities then, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But like you said, it was still, God met you where you were at in the sense that you had all that extra baggage. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I wanted to ask earlier, but now that we kind of circled back to it, because you had talked about that knee-jerk reaction that you had when this guru started quoting the words of Christ, and that you had this sort of resistance to it. Where do you think that came from? I guess maybe your upbringing in Lutheranism, or what do you think made that resistance?
That's a great question, and it took me a lot of reflecting to actually come to realize or believe. I believe that most of it came from watching movies and just seeing negative depiction after negative depiction of Christians and how they were portrayed in movies and popular media.
You know, that's a scary thing, because actually I was wondering the same question. I was wondering, was it personal experience? But I was wondering, is it just simple, plain propaganda? And in many ways, it sounds... Isn't that wild? That's scary.
And I had very few, like I could count on one hand the actual negative interactions that I had with Christians, and they were very mild. And most of it you could just also chalk up to weird Protestantism. Like one of the weirdest interactions I ever had with a Christian was in junior high, and he asked me, "Are you saved?" And I couldn't articulate why. That was just the most loaded question ever. But from an Orthodox perspective, we know that just that comes from so many erroneous theological presuppositions, right?
Yeah, it is an awkward question to be asked.
Yeah, so like the broad strokes of it is that over those 8 years, I could say that I was coming into a deeper and deeper relationship with Christ. I was becoming more and more sure about Christ. Everything over time that was not of Christ seemed more weird to me. So that was the general trajectory over those 8 years.
Was it this slow, I guess you could say, slow burning enlightenment towards the gospel that kind of slowly turned you off to the spiritual school you were in? Is that kind of what happened then?
Yeah, what did happen, John?
All right, so here's if I say this last part, then we have to get all the way through, guys.